All right, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about stability in aircraft design. So our goals are going to be to talk about the different types of aircraft stability, what design features contribute to that stability, and how weight and balance of an aircraft affect stability. All right, so aerodynamic stability is the tendency of an aircraft to return to a condition of equilibrium, so steady flight, after being displaced by an outside force like wind or turbulence, or by pilot control error input. An aircraft that is more stable has a greater tendency to return to its original attitude following a disturbance. So stability contributes to aircraft safety, obviously. A stable aircraft is easier to fly and reduces pilot fatigue during climbs, descents, and turns, and at both high and low air speeds. And aircraft stability also affects its ability to recover from conditions that could lead to stalls or spins. An aircraft that is considered stable will require less effort to control. Most aircraft, such as training aircrafts, are designed with a high degree of stability as a goal, but that's not always the case. Some aircraft, such as certain military aircraft, have been intentionally designed to be unstable because instability makes them more maneuverable. For these aircraft, maximizing maneuverability is more important than maximizing safety. Fighter jets tend to be very unstable and can even be unflyable without the help of computer-controlled fly-by-wire systems. And remember the Air Force coming in and talking to us about, Warhawk, I think, saying that they could fly with half a wing gone. So there are several different kinds of stability relevant to an aircraft. The kind of stability that a particular aircraft has is determined by the motion of the aircraft after it is displaced. Stability can either be static or dynamic. And within each of these categories, stability can be positive, neutral, or negative. Positive stability is the tendency of an object to return to its original attitude when displaced. So for example, imagine an airplane in straight level flight and the pilot pulls back sharply on the controls, causing the airplane to pitch upward, then releases the controls. A positively stable airplane will return to straight and level flight without any pilot input. Negative stability is a tendency of an object to move farther away from its original attitude when displaced. So again, for example, an airplane in straight level flight, a pilot pulls back sharply, causing the airplane to pitch upwards, then releases the controls. A negatively stable airplane will continue to pitch up at ever-increasing angles, never making any motion back toward its original orientation. So in practice, negatively stable airplanes are uncontrollable by pilot input alone. So neutral stability happens when there's no movement either toward or away from the direction of displacement. So imagine a pilot pulls back sharply on the controls, causing the plane to pitch upwards, then releases the controls. A neutrally stable airplane will remain at this attitude in the absence of additional pilot input. Static stability refers to the initial tendency of an aircraft to return to its original position when it's disturbed. Static stability can be positive, neutral, or negative. For each of the following descriptions, imagine an airplane that has been disturbed in an upward direction. If the airplane exhibits positive static stability, the first motion of the airplane will be to pitch down back towards the original attitude. All positively stable aircraft exhibit positive static stability. If the airplane exhibits neutral static stability, the aircraft will have a tendency to remain in the newly commanded attitude. For example, an airplane is put into a turn and the pilot lets go of the controls, the aircraft will remain in that turn. If the airplane exhibits negative static stability, the first motion of the airplane will be to continue pitching upward away from the original attitude. So for example, if an aircraft is rolled to a high bank angle, letting go of the controls results in the aircraft continuing to roll further. So dynamic stability refers to the tendency of the aircraft's ongoing motion over time. As with static stability, dynamic stability can be positive, neutral, or negative. It is important to underscore that underscore that an aircraft must have positive static stability before it can have any type of dynamic stability. So in other words, an airplane that is statically stable will have some form of dynamic stability. The amplitude of the oscillations determine if it has positive, negative, or neutral dynamic stability. So we can see our diagrams there. So positive dynamic stability, the aircraft moves through a series of dampening oscillations that eventually return it to the original attitude. Neutral stability, oscillations indefinitely without decreasing or increasing in frequency or amplitude. Negative dynamic stability, the aircraft continues to moves further from its original attitude as the amplitude increases on each oscillation. Alright, so advantages of positive stability. So most non-military aircraft display positive static and positive dynamic stability for several reasons. Positively stable aircraft are safer in the event of an upset. They are easier for pilots to control, and they provide greater comfort for passengers. And you can try this activity at home. It is in your books as student activity 1 in this section. So this is something we've already talked about. An airplane can have stability around 3 of its axes. So pitch stability occurs around the plane's lateral axis, so the up and down. Roll stability occurs around the plane's longitudinal axis, so the tilts left and right. Yaw stability occurs around the plane's vertical axis, so the rotation of left and right. So now you guys can stand up and put your arms out and pretend to be a plane and demonstrate to your family members what pitch, roll, and yaw are. So a pilot's ability to control an aircraft's pitch, so its movement around the lateral axis, is very important. Of all 3 axes, pitch stability is also considered to be the most affected by variables introduced by the pilot, such as airplane loading and result of the center of gravity. So, consider a scenario in which an airplane is pitched upward by turbulence and the pilot does not take corrective action with the controls. As the pitch attitude increases, the airplane slows, passing less air over its lifting surfaces, which creates less lift. So as lift decreases, the nose begins to change direction and tilt downward. Eventually, the plane will have pitched down sufficiently to begin accelerating again. As the plane speeds up, the lifting surfaces begin producing more lift, which pitches the nose back upward again. So each cycle in this series of climbs and descents gets smaller. And as energy is lost to friction and other forms of drag, eventually the airplane returns to its original orientation of level flight. So as you guys learned in the lesson on weight and balance, aircraft are designed to operate with a specific center of gravity range. Loading an aircraft so that its center of gravity falls outside the intended range can make an aircraft unstable, resulting in something very bad. We saw a video of a plane crashing with that situation. I believe it was a Boeing 747. So here's another similar incident that we're going to watch using a Navy C-2 Greyhound. And the cargo shifted on takeoff. Alright, so both static and dynamic stability are affected by the location of the aircraft's center of gravity. During flight testing, when designing an aircraft, much time and effort is spent establishing that design's forward and aft CG limits. For most certified civil airplanes, it is critical that the plane remain both statically and dynamically stable throughout the allowable CG range. Aircraft loaded toward the forward CG limit will exhibit greater stability than those loaded aft. This is due largely to the amount of downward force applied by the horizontal stabilizer to maintain level flight. In conventional aircraft, the center of lift is always behind the center of gravity, causing a torquing moment that pushes the tail upward. The downward force imposed on the horizontal stabilizer opposes the torque, contributing to the stability around the pitch axis. So roll stability around the longitudinal axis is achieved by the action of the wings, specifically the design of the wings or the manner in which the wings are attached to the fuselage. Many civil aircraft have their wings attached in such a manner as to create upward tilt from the fuselage and wingtips. To a person standing in front of the airplane, viewing it head-on, the wings will appear to form a shallow V, with the fuselage at the base of the V. The upward tilt of the wings is called dihedral, is a major factor in roll stability. So some aircraft have swept back wings to provide roll stability. So wing placement also affects roll stability. High wing airplanes generally have more roll stability than low wing airplanes, as the weight is being suspended below the wings acts like a pendulum to correct any upset. So positive yaw stability is largely the result of the vertical stabilizer providing a feathering effect. When the pressure on both sides of the vertical stabilizer is the same, the aircraft flies straight. Any yawing that takes place on one side of the fin or the other is countered by the opposite side pushing back and reestablishing directional stable flight. So an example would be as the vertical stabilizer moves right in an upset, the nose of the plane yaws to the left, the pivot point being the center of gravity. This yawing motion exposes more of the right side of the fin to the slipstream, pushing the tail to the left and pivoting, or yawing, the nose back to the right until it again is flying straight ahead. Vertical fins thus function like feathers on the tail of an arrow. So the placement of the aircraft's engine also affects pitch stability. For instance, in airplanes with engines mounted below the center of gravity, adding power will cause the nose to pitch up, and reducing power will cause the nose to pitch down. In multi-engine aircraft, engine placement also affects yaw stability. With two engines mounted on opposite wings, the thrust of each engine balances the other in flight. If, however, one of the engines fail, that balance is lost. As the good engine continues to create thrust, the airplane will yaw and roll in the direction of the dead engine, severely affecting stability around the longitudinal axis. Engineers may minimize the effect of the asymmetric thrust by placing the engines as close together as they possibly can. So stabilizers on the tail also affect both pitch and yaw stability. Horizontal stabilizers provide downforce to keep the aircraft's nose up in flight. Vertical stabilizers create left and right yawing force to keep the airplane flying straight. Larger stabilizers and those farther from the center of gravity provide more stability. While stability in an aircraft is always important, maneuverability is also important, particularly if the aircraft is designed for specific purposes. Maneuverability describes an aircraft's ability to change direction. It is the speed at which an airplane can change the rates of its roll, pitch, and yaw. The faster the airplane can change the orientation of these axes, the more maneuverable it is. So airframe design is also important to stability and maneuverability. Placing the horizontal and vertical stabilizers a large distance from the center of gravity tends to make the aircraft more stable and easier to control due to the added leverage applied across a longer distance. And so the opposite would be true as well. Get them closer together, you got more issues. An aft CG lessens the control force required to pitch up, but requires additional force to pitch down. An aft CG also decreases the rudder force required to yaw the aircraft, improving lateral maneuverability. CG location has a negligible effect on roll state. So a forward CG requires a greater control force to yaw the aircraft, reducing lateral maneuverability. A forward CG also lessens the control force required to pitch down, but requires additional force to pitch up. So here we can see some unstable aircraft. So these are advanced mission-specific aircraft that it is impossible for the pilot to control them using conventional methods. The stability of these aircraft relies on computers that quickly process data and respond to atmospheric conditions The pilot still has the ability to control the aircraft, but the pilot inputs pass through a computer that augments those control inputs based on atmospheric conditions. All right, so hopefully, we've seen there's a lot of design that goes into stability and maneuverability. So they have to balance multiple factors when designing this: weight, drag, cost, efficiency, performance. So stability must be balanced with maneuverability. Often the more stable an aircraft, the less maneuverable it is, and vice versa.